work is on institutional trust for climate responsibility in Ghana. Okay, so this is the outline of my presentation. So we've all acknowledged that climate change is an issue, and both literature and policy have all admitted that it's a challenge. But we need to take action now. Otherwise, we are going to get one side of the picture on the left. Either we are moving towards green or we are moving towards a devastating future. But then the issue of trust is very important. We see one helping another to climb a mountain. But the picture on the right indicates that a lot of people are running away from that responsibility, which is the fight against climate change and taking action. So in light of this, we decided to formulate 3 objectives. The first one is if institutional trust is relevant in the fight against climate change. And then we now disaggregate the institutional trust. We have partial and impartial. When we talk about partial, those who do the policies, institutions that help in the formulation of the policies. Then the impartial ones are those who implement it. Then the last one was that is the location of the person or Ghanaians. Does it influence people's trust in the fight against climate change? So our data was taken from Afrobarometer data. They took data from 2,400 Ghanaians who are 18 years and above, and it's a national representative kind of study which is based on cluster. Then these are the variables we consider. For the dependent, what is climate responsibility? We are looking at fights by the ordinary citizen, business, government, and developed countries. For the independent, the partial institutions, you are looking at trust in the president or the presidency, parliament or the National Assembly, the electoral commission, local council, municipal, DCs, ruling party, and the opposition party. For the impartial, we are looking at trust in police, army, law courts, traditional leaders, religious leaders, and then we brought in the other control variables, like the age of the respondents, the gender, education, location, economic condition of the country, the household living condition, if there is any climate policy, and then if the person is aware or has heard of climate change. In terms of the estimation technique, I used quantile regression and then ordered logistic regression. Okay, so for the first objective, where we said effect of trust, if trust was relevant, in the second column, which is the OLS, we found that trust was not significant. That is a base model. When we look at it in terms of the quantile, we saw that trust and the fights against climate change are positive. Where we have the red space, which is 1.22, meaning that when we trust these institutions, then the fight against climate change is there and is significant. But when it comes to the impartial institutions, now we've disaggregated our trust based on the 2 categories. For the presidency, the more we trust them, the lesser the fight, the likelihood they are fighting climate change. And I think that it's reflecting what is on the ground. That's why we have negative 0.063 and significant. When we come to metro, municipal, DC, that's a positive effect in the fight against climate change. That means that Ghanaians believe there are DCs, MCs, and metropolitan assemblies in fighting climate change. When it comes to the opposition party, it's also positive that they will help contribute to climate change. In terms of the impartial, we found out that the law courts is a way of fighting against climate change. That's why we have positive 0.077, which is significant. In terms of religious leaders, it's also helping the fight against climate change. Okay, then what I did is that with the location of a Ghanaian aids in his trust in the fight against climate change based on these 2 categories of institutions. we found out that when the person is within the urban sector or urban area, it reduces their trust. When their trust increases, it doesn't help in the fight against climate change. With regard to the rural areas, it's positive, meaning that rural dwellers trust in the partial institutions like the presidency, that the parliament will make laws to help in the fight against climate change. In terms of the impartial, we found out that they have the same value, meaning that both those in the urban centers and rural dwellers, once their trust in these institutions are increasing, the lesser or the less likelihood that these institutions, both partial and impartial institutions, will fight climate change. So our recommendation, government needs to demonstrate a strong commitment towards environmental equality. That means that the government or the presidency can decide to need to strengthen its action towards climate change, either by policy, by demonstration or commitment that they are fighting climate change. Then opposition parties can also help in the dialogue when it comes to conversations about climate change and in debate in parliament too as well. Then religious leaders should also have representation when it comes to climate change issues. In terms of the other recommendation, when it comes to performance-based, the Ministry of Environment, and this morning we also had at the presidency we have a section for sustainability and energy and environment. They too can help in this regard. Then the last point is that they should regular reports. The Committee on Environment should give us regular reports so that it will build the trust of Ghanaians. Finally, we want to say that trust is important in the fight against climate change, and then institutions need to take concrete actions in order to build the trust. Thank you.
I'm looking at your recommendations and I'm wondering if it says anything to me. It really doesn't. Does it? You are saying government needs to demonstrate strong commitment. What else does government need to do to show that we are demonstrating strong commitment? Opposition parties, besides NDC, NPP, but everybody does agree that climate change in Ghana, we are not like the US. Integrate religious leaders. I've spoken on several religious, convocations, and they've quoted the Quran, both the Quran and the Bible to reinforce that we need those kind of actions. So, are there really something that's coming out of your recommendation that I'm still not getting?
But I don't know if religious leaders have representation. Since from what you are saying, if you are making policies, then I don't know if religious leaders are part of the group that makes recommendations or inputs in there.
What they do? Is it so we should include the religious leaders in policy formulation?
No,
that's the recommendation.
They should have representation in order to express, because they have a way of also building the trust. Ghanaians are very religious. So in order to build trust in these institutions, they can even say, oh, this policy that the government implemented, we even contributed to this and the government has implemented.
I want to find out regarding the mistrust in the presidency and trust in the MMDs. Are you able to share some of the questions that were asked that resulted in that? Because I'm thinking that if policies are made at the top, the implementation is through the MMDs, right? So if Ghanaians do not have trust in the presidency at the top, but have trust in the MMDA that are implementing the policies, the acts that the president has assented to, then I'm curious to know the kind of questions that were given them to give such results? Can you share something?
Okay, so from the Afrobarometer questionnaire, they were asked if they trust the president. Yes, just trust. And then with regard to the other ones, the same thing. But I think that when you make a policy and you don't take action, then people might not, even though you have done something, it's not enough. It's like, it's not, you can decide that, oh, like what we have been saying, you can have a law, but when it comes to implementation, do people trust that you have implemented? And the local people, the individuals within the cities and villages see that, oh, our DC or local government is committed. That's where they begin to trust the decisions.
So would there be some form of, should I say, misinformation that is giving us such result? Because I'm thinking that even the trust should be defined. Trust in what? Okay, so if the presidency has assented to the policies and MMDAs, indeed, the local people will not see the president coming down to implement the issues, right? The MMDAs, the assemblymen, assembly members, etc. So I think that education should go on for people to know that these things being done is coming from the top. So if they don't know and they don't see the president, which will not happen, coming down to implement some of them, we are definitely going to have such results. Which to me, I think we are not being fair to the president.
So I just want to say that these are perceptions of Ghanaians, all of us. It could be that you were interviewed and you give that kind of response.
So he's saying that in the first picture, it looks like someone is actually taking responsibility. So it looks like the person climbing up is screaming climate responsibility and someone is actually holding him up. In the second image, it looks like someone is screaming climate responsibility, then we are all running away. So the shelter is behind those running away. So that's his image depiction. And his theory is based on me saying that we often look at the climate situation as a holistic report. But if we go into disintegrating it and looking at it single by single, we realize that often it is those that take responsibility and say, I'm pulling one trust or one agency to fight or champion the cause that is really working, not the majority. I think that's what he's trying to say.
We have to wrap up. I have a different opinion here because, for example, we're all here trying to address one thing, right? So the fact that we are all here trying to address that in itself puts us together to be responsible to the fight. Like, if you disagree us, of course, we also individually do assume that. So that is my interpretation. That maybe the research and so we will have to allow you. So on this note, we want to thank you for that presentation. I'm sure we can